Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Mary and I am an alcoholic. My dry date is the 10th of August 1984. My group is the Third Tradition group in Markham, Ontario. I have a sponsor, she has a sponsor, and I sponsor these wonderful women, and I'm just so delighted to be here. I'd like to thank Jerry so much for all the effort that him and Mouse and the committee and everybody else put into it. And we have a great lineup of speakers here. You're in for a treat this weekend. Let's hope that, I don't know how I'm going to do, but you know, we used to come here every year. I used to come here every year and we speak with my sponsor Clancy. And I see his picture there. And I'm very moved this morning, you know, because I'm doing steps 4 and 5. And what it reminded me of, and I just jumped to step 5 here, is that a funny incident. I'd gone back to Jamaica for a couple of years because that's where I caused the most damage. I used to live in Jamaica. And my sponsor had told me to go back to Jamaica and make amends to the island. And and she had also recommended when I was down there that I get Clancy as my sponsor. And so he was sponsoring me long distance. He was just absolutely amazing. I was only 8 years sober, and I was, you know, I'm not doing the amends step, but you know how you feel of fear and everything about going back and facing the people you did a lot of damage to. It was not easy. And so I was flying up to the States to see Clancy, and he says, and we'll do a mini fifth. We'll drive around and we'll do a mini fifth step. And I prepared a mini fifth step, and he had this old car, and we're driving around, and I'm reading my fifth step, and it all went well. And then I was very hungry because I hadn't had anything to eat that day. I was so nervous, so I took out my stiletto knife to cut my apple. And Clancy said, "What's that?" I said, "It's my knife." He said, "Your knife? You carry a knife?" I said, "Yes, you know, just for protection." He says, "From here on in, you never carry a knife again," and I never did. I never ever did. You know, step 4 for me and step 5 have certainly been the great turning points in my life. I had this desire, which I'll tell you about, to get rid of all the stuff that used to haunt me. And I was so anxious to get this 4th step done, because I do believe it's the beginning of a lifetime practice. I do believe it is the turning point, that I am going to stop being the person I used to be, to hopefully one day becoming the person I want to be, to hopefully one day becoming a better human being, a citizen of the universe. And all the actions that I've taken over 4 and 5 over the years that I've done them, I've certainly felt a little bit of growth, and I'm so grateful for everything that's gone on. You know, I have Rodney here from Vancouver. I'm so glad to see you, Rodney. I used to live in Toronto, and before I get into it, I'll tell you a little thing that happened recently that has shown me that yes, the way I used to behave towards people is certainly not there anymore. The way that I can now be kind and thoughtful towards people. I was speaking for this lovely AA member that asked me to come to the States. He said, "Drive to Vancouver and I'll drive you across the border." So I drove to Vancouver. I flew to Vancouver. He drove me across the border, and we had a wonderful weekend. He is a little great member of AA, a great group. It was a delight to be there, a delight to speak at his little event. It was about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive to get me back. So we're driving back, and we're about an hour into the journey to get me back across the Canadian border to catch the flight, when he says, "Mary, I forgot my passport." Now, if I had not done the 4th and 5ths I've done, I immediately felt compassion and felt sorry. He poor soul, he was absolutely destroyed. So Rodney happened to be in the car with his sponsor in Canada. So he called his sponsor. And his sponsor said, "Tell Mary to walk across the border and we'll get someone to pick her up at the border." So he drove me the next hour to the border, and I'm walking across the border with 5 illegal immigrants, and and then I was given directions to go and sit down in the duty free and wait for the wonderful person to come and pick me up that would take me to the airport. That's good sponsorship. They're following directions and they're willing. And it was a public holiday in Canada, and she was giving up her time to come get me. So she comes in and she's wonderful and she's so happy to be of service. And she said, I'll get you there in time. And as we go to drive out the duty free, the spikes come up. You cannot exit the duty free. Once you're in the duty free at the border, you've got to go back through the States.
Oh my God.
She doesn't have a passport. So and she's sorry about that, but she didn't know she could get. And I just feel compassion. And we go in to the federal holding for an hour, and they question her, and apparently the US knows everything about every Canadian citizen. They could tell her she was a teacher and give her a lecture about behaving well and, knowing the border rules. And we got out of there, and there's 2 exits. There's one to Seattle, and there's one to Vancouver. And she's saying, Mary, we still have a little time. We can still probably get you there. She's talking to me and driving me, and goes out through Seattle. And I'm back in the good old US of A. So, of course, we have to come around to go back through the Canadian border. She doesn't have a passport. The Canadian border guy said to me, didn't you just walk through here? But here's the thing. Because of all the actions I've taken over the years, I was able to put myself in their position and to think about all the good that they had done and to see the good that they had done and given up their time to give service. That's a great benefit you get from this turning point. I was in Scotland just about 4 weeks ago, and it was a big family celebration, and my old aunt's still alive, and all my cousins were there, and we're going through all the pictures. And she's saying, oh, look, there's little Joe. He was such a sweet child. And there's little Maureen, and Maureen was always so good. And there's little Phyllis, and Phyllis was lovely. And then she comes to a picture of me. There's Mary. And a great silence descended on the room. And she said, but she's a good girl now. And my cousin said, when she was going out to play, didn't you used to say to her, see if you can get yourself adopted? And she said, yes, that's because she was a problematic child. Which was very kind. Because here's the thing. When I did my first, fourth, and fifth, I was only 6 weeks sober. I am one of those alcoholics that actually hit bottom and kept going. I am one of those alcoholics who, as Billy so beautifully stated last night, just drinking. Never that first drink. That first drink was never enough. Never enough. I drank myself out of my children's life. I drank myself out of my house life. I drank myself out of my marriage. I drank myself out of humanity. I drank myself to living at the bottom of Lincoln Road on Miami Beach. That's where alcohol took me. And I hated myself. And I did not want consciousness. Because when I had consciousness, it was kind of like the Christmas story in Charles Dickens. I get the ghosts coming at me of the people I have harmed. It's unbearable for me. And then I go back to Canada. And I'm 4 years in and out the institutions being treated for manic depression. And as it says in this book, these poor psychologists, we never tell them the truth. Ever. I used to say I drank because my husband hit me. Well, I was the one hitting him. You know, I was the aggressor. Because that's what happened to me. I had such fear in me that eventually it became aggression. So when I got into AA, and I had about 6 weeks sobriety, I drank again, and I won't get into the details of that. It all had to do with my children. And that night a little girl said the third step prayer with me. And if you ask me what happened, because I've never wanted a drink since that day, the 10th of August 1984, I got a mea culpa, which in Latin is my fault, my fault, my fault. I suddenly saw that everything, every situation, everything that had ever caused me grief, every heart I had broken in my family, I saw them all. I saw them all clearly, and I wanted to fix it. And back then in 84, they weren't doing the steps as much. I had heard that you got to do the fifth step. If you don't do the fifth step, you'll get drunk. That was about as much as I heard. But I wasn't encouraged to do that. I was told to come and sit in the rooms and I'll get it by osmosis. Well, I didn't. I didn't get it by osmosis. But there were a few people that I heard, and I listened to them, and it scared me. And actually, Bill Wilson has written about this. He said a lot of our old-timers with long-term sobriety are suddenly having nervous breakdowns, and it's found out that maybe they didn't do a fourth and fifth. And that scared the hell out of me. So when I was about 6 weeks sober, after having completed a couple of weeks in recovery, 3 weeks in recovery centre, I got shingles, and I'm sitting in my bed. And I'm in agony because I won't take any medication for it. And I thought, I got to do a fourth step. Because I knew that I could not live sober with all the stuff I had done in my life. From a young child, alcohol did not make me do all the wrong things. I was doing that from when I could think. I was stealing from a very early age. I was causing people heartache from a very early age. I had no moral compass. I love it when Dr. Silkworth said he realized that alcoholics needed some kind of a moral psychology, but he didn't know quite how to apply it. It was outside their synthetic means of applying it. That's what this is, 4 and 5. It's a moral psychology. It's taking down everything that we've ever done to hurt anybody. And also then I was reading here and I thought, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And I picked up the phone and I remember some old timers in Edmonton, wonderful old guys, saying, before you do your fifth step, make sure that you've before you do your fourth, make sure you've got an appointment to do your fifth step. So I called somebody's name I'd written down. It was a Jesuit priest. And he was a member of AA. And he also heard fifth steps, because I still didn't believe that you would accept me if you knew all the things I'd done. I can't tell you all the things I've done, because that's the fifth step. And you might not like me. But some of them were dreadful. And that's long before I ever drank. Long before I ever drank. So you see, wherever is the predisposition to this illness of alcoholism that is actually centered in the moral part, I had it. Because I never had any morals. I never cared that what I was stealing from you would leave you suffering. I didn't care about that. I was selfish, self-centered, and self-will run riot. And I read in this story about Bill, where when Abby had come to see him in Towns Hospital, he had done a little fifth step with Abby. And then I remember reading when he was working with Father Ed Dowling, he'd done another little step with Father Ed. And I thought, I'm going to do the best I can do, because Bill says in there, we'll never get well until we tell somebody all of our life story. And that's what I did. I didn't have enough in me to do the columns. So I just prayed to a God I didn't really believe in at that time, and I started writing down everything I'd ever done. Just writing non-stop. I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. because I needed the relief to get it on paper. I think Einstein said, you can't heal a mind with the same mind that created it. You've got to put it down on paper. If I sit and rationalize in my head, I'll never get anywhere. That is a type of relief. It was my mind. I knew the problem centered in my mind, although I didn't understand the completeness of that. I wanted something in here. I wanted a little bit of shush and then a way to turn it around. I remember I had read James Allen. Have you ever read James Allen, that As a Man Thinketh? Mind is a master power that molds and makes, and man is mind, and evermore he takes the tool of thought and shape, and as he will, creates 1,000 ills, 1,000 joys. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass. What I had created had come from here. Everything I created had come from my mind. The dishonest mind. The person that puts himself ahead of everybody else without consideration for anybody. I had created everything around me, and that is the gift I got. Now, many years later, and over the years, I'd done other steps according to what it says here in the book. But what I did that day, in writing that out, gave me such relief. And I got the feeling that the drinking problem was gone from me. I truly believe that a lot of the drinking is caused by the things we have done and our inability to live conscious with that consciousness. I truly believe that is what it's all about. When I can't bear myself, I can't live sober. It's horrendous. There's a couple of things I had written down here. That when something happened that day, I could no longer bear the burden, the angst, the horror of my life. I had to share it with another human being, because if I didn't do it, I would one more time make the decision to kill myself. When you have that anxious apartness, when you feel different to everybody around you, what is that? It's because of shame. In my part, it was because of shame. I felt too ashamed to look at anybody in the eye, to face them. And I took all of that down with me to sit down in front of this priest the first time. And I sat in that vestry with this man and spoke about everything I had ever done that I never thought I could tell anybody. Everything from when I was a child, I'd always had this horrible feeling of being different. This horrible feeling of shame that just grew with me as I grew. I started stealing. My first stealing was an apple. It started with an apple. I was born during the war in 1943. We didn't have any food. We were on rations. A bunch of GIs brought all these apples when I was in school at age 6. Wonderful and beautiful apples. And everybody was so happy. And I had my apple and ate it immediately. And all the other kids went and put theirs in their pockets for after, or to share with Mummy. And I decided I was going to ask for a toilet break and go and take their apples, which I did. I went and stole their apples. And I thought about that. I thought that was like the first drink for me. That was like the beginning of this descent into it being all about me, not caring about anybody else. And it just went on and on and on. And when I sat with that priest that day, a religion I was born into, a religion that I had spurned, these good men that I had spurned, and sat and spoke and so absolutely nothing come into his eyes of judgment. Nothing come into his eyes of how could you. Just sometimes a little acquiescence, sometimes a little nod, sometimes a little agreement, sometimes a little story from him. And then he gave me a little time to think about it. And you know, like a lot of us, there's always that one thing we don't want to quite talk about. And I was able to talk about that eventually. And here's the thing, when I left there that day, I had been walking in the shadows. As a chronic alcoholic, with the life I had led, I did not walk in the sunlight. I walked in the shadows all the time. And when I came out that day, in downtown Edmonton, Alberta, with all the big buildings there, where I'd normally go where it's all shadows, and walk with my head down, he had told me, as the old timers used to do, lift your head up, Mary. He says, go out, lift your head up, and go in the sunlight. And that's what I did. The great relief for me of what had gone on. When Billy spoke last night about this illness of alcoholism, to me it's a soul sickness. You may not have the story like me. You may not have done some of the stuff I've done. But whatever it is, there's something about us that has some kind of an amoral component. I don't understand what it is. I just know that I never ever want to be like that anymore. I just know that for me, I want to lead the good life with a loving God that I've found in AA, and to keep current with what I'm doing and looking into my soul. It's such a process of healing. If someone ever told me that you are going to find freedom, you are going to find relief from your alcoholism, you are going to know a whole new life if you just sit down and tell everybody about all the terrible things you've done, I'd say, you crazy? That doesn't sound right to me. But it's the truth. Yeah. Who knew? Who knew that this is the gate we'll walk through to freedom? I certainly didn't. I was amazed. And I'll tell you, the more horrible things you've done, suffering from this alcoholism, the more clarity you get. The more clarity you get about what you've done. It doesn't go away, it doesn't subside. It gets worse and worse and worse. And in the book here, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. That was me. I was an utter and complete failure at life. Because it was a life built around me. And I didn't know that. You see, I thought alcoholism was about alcohol. I didn't know it's about personality disorder. I didn't know that eventually I will get a change of personality that will remove me from being the person I used to be being the person I am today. The person I strive to be today. I still make mistakes, but I didn't know that this whole process would work. I think about Father Ed Dowling when he went. I've been thinking about him a lot recently. The first time old Father Ed visited Bill Wilson after reading the big book. And Bill was living in a upstairs in an old club. And he thought that Father Ed was a drunk because Father Ed had he was crippled. And Father Ed said to him, I want to know where you got these 12 steps. And Bill said, they just came to me and they were also part of the Oxford group. And Father Ed said to him, they're very similar to the spiritual disciplines of Ignatius Loyola, which was a Jesuit, that they go in for every year to get what they call discernment. Discernment is something I get from the 4th and 5th. The 4th is the beginning of what I'm going to be doing in the 8th step. It's letting me see what I've done to other people and how I don't want to do that anymore. You see, the spiritual life becomes as sharp as the edge of a razor. You see me on a cane here. It's my Achilles tendon. 30 years ago I severed my Achilles tendon. My leg grew back thin, and I'll tell you what happened. To me, I don't know how it happens, but I get paid for anything I try to do wrong today, it comes back immediately. Okay? I don't get a break. I was tired of going into the airports in Toronto at the customs and immigration because you have to wait for hours. And there's only usually about 3 customs agents on for hundreds of people. And I don't always behave well, I have to say that. So I'm in there and it's like a couple of hours, but I'm like 1 hour in. And because I can be a creator of chaos rather than harmony, I turned to the guy in front of me and I said to him, what do you think of this? It's disgusting. I do this every week waiting in this line. And he said, what are you going to do? So then I wait a while and I turn around to the other guy. And I tell him how I feel. And he says, yeah, I do too, but I've just learned to wait. And then I see all these people coming through in a wheelchair. And I think, that's not right. There's probably nothing wrong with them. So what I decided to do was start limping through disabled. And when they stop and say, do you have a disabled on your ticket? I said, no, it's my Achilles. No. A short time later, my Achilles went. I came in a wheelchair. And that's how life is today. Do I stay well? Do I stay good because I know of the repercussions? Whatever it is in the universe, whatever it is in the spiritual awakening, whatever it is that turns us around. Because you see, the reason, I should only talk for me. The reason I need a change of personality is because there's something wrong with my personality. I have papers to that effect. I have had judges sign off on that. Not only that, but in my pursuit of the spiritual life, when I was living in Jamaica, back in Jamaica, 8-9 years sobriety, there was about 4 or 5 Jesuits coming to AA meetings. They were all alcoholics. They were all based in Jamaica. And I had said to them, listen, I want to see if I can take communion for my mother. I'm not religious, but I'd been at my mother's funeral drunk, and I wanted to take communion for my mother. It was just a feeling I had. I said, but I've been married 4 times and not having lived according to the Catholic Church. They said, Mary, why don't you just write out a bit and we'll send it to Rome and see what they say about getting you a dispensation. So I sat down and wrote it all out again, everything I'd ever done. And they sent it off. And a few weeks later, they called me down to chat to me. And Rome had sent 4 pages of the DSM. Do you know what the DSM is? It said, more or less what my psychiatrist told the judge. It says, it seems that Mary has a abnormal personality. And we feel that she should never have been married in the first place. They should tell that to all my husbands who have nervous dispositions, They said, but we're giving her a dispensation and she can have communion. And she might be like the woman at the well for AA. So, what is this but a miracle of healing? Billy said last night, the age of miracles is not past. Who knew? Who knew that if I follow these steps, I will never have to drink again? Who knew that if I follow these steps, my family will be happy to see me? My children would come back into my life and become the most loving, beloved children. All because I'm going to uncover. What was it old Chuck used to say? Uncover, discover, discard. That's what I'm doing here. I love that thing, and I use it a lot, that Michelangelo, they said to him, how did you carve that old statue of David? He said, I just chipped away the parts that weren't David. That old piece of marble, you create something beautiful. The old sick soul, you create something beautiful. You become a person that maybe you always envied. Have you ever noticed that anxious apartness you used to have before you did this step? Because you just felt so bad about yourself. And doing all the inventory. Sex. When eventually I went and did all the way it was told to me in the book here. What were my biggest problems? Stealing, which eventually went to grifting professionally, and sex. That thing used to move me around. And I don't know why. Because I'd go a long time and I wouldn't, and then suddenly I'd see somebody and you get that bing, that bing, and I gotta follow that there, wherever it's taking me, right? I don't know what that is. Never lasts for long, but whatever it is, it's a mover, and you're laughing because you felt it. And I realized that a lot of the times it had been about when I was still, what's the word? Before I was being used, I was a user. Before I had reached the degree of degradation I had been a user. When I still looked like something. It was always for a purpose. Always for a reason. Always to use. And what you find in here when you do this inventory, that we can't be a judge of anybody's sex conduct. I listened to a lot of, well, not of course from my sponsees in this room, but I listen to a lot of inventories, and even me sometimes says, "Whoa," but I don't show it, like Clancy said, used to live with a sheep in Montana, you know. I don't comment. I'm just, but yeah. And that's all the stuff too that keeps us forever apart from, isn't it? That's the stuff that separates us. There is so much to find out in this book. It's awesome to me. I don't know if you're like me, but recently I had a newcomer. I don't take on a lot of newcomers, but I usually pass them on. But I have a newcomer. And we've just completed her 5th step. However, she was difficult. And on the way up to it, I said to her, I want you to go home and read, whatever I said, Dr. Silkworth, and then read Bill's story. And then you and me are going to talk about it and get it out and get our books, and you can ask me questions. And she came back a couple of times with a dissertation on doctors and alcoholism. I said, we're going to do the big book. She says, yes, but I thought you'd be interested in this dissertation. Because she's an intellectual. And eventually I had to get her down and get her down and get her down. And when she came and did her 4th step, I was absolutely in awe of how she looked before she started and how she looked when she finished. Because a good 4th step is a transformation. It is transformative. You see it in the eyes of the people. I see it watching some people here who are crying because of the effect this has had on them. That's what it's all about. I love it. I have done so many little 4ths and 5ths over the years with wonderful sponsors. Because you see, even although we talked about in the 10 steps, we keep current. But to me, if I have something reoccurring, a defect of character, a way of behaving, a way of treating somebody, then I know that I got to get down to the real cause and condition that's causing that, because it's very, 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 very deep. And obviously I've missed it. I don't know what it is. And I have had occasion to do that a few times with wonderful sponsors who have taken the time and taken their experience to show me what this is all about. If I need things sometimes explained to me, because there is such a mode of behaving from the old self that every now and then you want to, it kind of creeps in. I'll give you an example of that, how I had to do a 4th and 5th, a little 4th and 5th a few years ago. I was working with a woman that God had put in my life to test my serenity level. You know that one? So, and I was, after my husband died, there wasn't a lot of money, and I had to go back to work. I worked till I was 70. And she threw files at me. And one day I went in and she threw a file at me. And I used to try and behave well. I knew there was something not right with her, and I'd say, you really shouldn't do that, you might hurt yourself, And I was talking to my sponsor, and my sponsor said, well, if you want to stay in there, just behave better than you feel. So, anyway, one day, I guess it was a bad spiritual hair day, and I went in and she threw a file at me. And it was just her and I in the office. And I went to the front door and I closed the door. And I said, God, I'll see you when I come out. And I took her inventory from when she was born. I lost it. You ever had that rage? Now I'm talking, this is 2011. So I was quite a bit sober then. I never knew I had that degree of rage in me. Never knew. And it didn't last long, but it was like that red, you don't see anything else? And it just suddenly stopped, like a switch coming off. And I looked at her and she's cowering in her chair. And I felt so bad. She said, I think you should go home now, I've got work to do. I said, you go home. And she ran out the door. And I knelt down and I asked God to forgive me. And I called my sponsor. I tried to explain to him what had happened. Clancy used to say to me, stop the explaining and get down to what you did. He used to say, you know what they're going to have on your tombstone? She died of explanation. So, he said, you did what? He said, I want you to go in tomorrow, make amends, and give her a week's notice. And then I did a little 4-step on what had caused that degree of rage in me. And I got to the root of it. The cause and the condition, which is so important. And you know, I would say if there's any newcomers in here in your first year, follow your sponsor's instructions. But if there's things that you are finding that make this conscious living that we have to do, because living without a drink for an alcoholic is a very difficult thing in the beginning. Because reality sometimes is hard, isn't it? Reality can sometimes be very hard. And the things we have to cope with. So if there's things in your past that are particularly haunting, then why don't you talk to her about talking about it? There's still people who want you to wait a while before you do your 5th step. I go along with what people want to do. I trust you. You know what you need. God is telling you what I need, what you need, not me. I'm not God. I just want to be helpful and never ever hurtful. Ever. I'll finish up with just this. I don't know why I was born the way I was. It certainly wasn't my parents who made me the way I was. I came from a very good Catholic family who wouldn't even take a pencil without feeling bad and running back and putting it back. I have no idea what created what was to become a monster. But I know that alcohol was the solution to it. I know that when I drank alcohol, I got a little relief when it was still working. I knew that when I drank alcohol, every little thing was going to be all right. Until it wasn't. And then I'm haunted. And then I'm falling back into that old behavior. And something happened in 1935 that is a God-given idea to Bill Wilson in Towns Hospital, where he gave us eventually these steps. Alcoholics Anonymous is a miracle of healing, tortured souls, lives that are broken beyond compare, like mine was. I can't believe the depths alcohol took me to. And I can't believe the lightness I got that first time I shared a 5th step with somebody. That is something that is experiential and almost completely altering in your view of the world and your relationship to the world. So I'm very grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very grateful to all the people who took time to be with me. I'm not doing a step study, so I don't need to go through all that. I didn't need to go through all this. You know what a step's all about. You know how to work the step. I'm just telling you about the great experience that for me, this 4 and 5 has given me. Thank you. Thank you very much.